This is COP TV. I'm Tony Koznek, and I'm here again with Dave Sherman, who's our business consultant. And if you were with us last week, you'll recognize that Dave and I are just continuing on from where we were when we were talking about the Capitalist Manifesto and a kind of a philosophy of why we are where we are. It's sort of a political philosophy. Not ours, but from an article that we were looking at. And we bridged into a question of corporate culture that you brought up at the end, Dave. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Tony.
And you started to talk about, isn't it possible to make certain changes in our attitudes as exemplified in business by how, the type of environment that we're in. And there's just got a thing here from Wikipedia about organizational culture. What is it? So Wikipedia says it's an idea which describes the psychology, the attitudes, experience, and beliefs and values of an organization. And it's been defined as the specific collection of values and norms that are shared by people and groups in an organization, and they control the way that they interact with each other and with their public or their stakeholders or whatever. So tell me a little bit about this. You do some work in that area.
Well, yes, and I've experienced it myself. So the reason I brought up the point of and it was really a question, could corporate culture help shape the environment where people could feel more comfortable starting to explore their inner urgings and start to open up some of the shifts that we're talking about. And in my personal experience, I started in the oil industry, and I used to care, still do, passionately about the environment. And I realized that when I left the oil industry and looked back at my experience, that at one level I had been checking a part of myself at the door. I wasn't bringing my whole self to my job because there were certain things that I was conflicted about. And I looked around and saw that I believe a lot of people in the oil industry are in a similar way. Today I work in a company where I feel totally at home with sort of everyone and bring kind of all of myself there, as do others. And we are inside many other companies where people don't really bring everything to themselves.
Yeah, but why do you bring all of that, or why are you attempting to do that? What is it that corporate culture does? I mean, what's going on there that made for some kind of a shift in values?
So in some places, things are only recognized as good if they are logical, left-brained, put together in a certain way and conforming in a certain way. And otherwise, everything is discounted. And the oil industry is a little bit that way.
Give me an example.
So when we have certain ways of analyzing things. So if you want to get a big project that is justified, you're going to look at the financial numbers and run some numbers on it. And if they come out in that way, then you can get something justified. If they don't, you can't get it justified. Well, I worked for a while in the airline industry, and nobody could run numbers on if you had fewer aircraft types. Instead of 5, you go down to 1 aircraft type. How much money would you save? We didn't count any numbers that way. We had no calculations. So in the culture, you couldn't make those decisions. And it even goes further than that. If you wanted to talk about things that people might call touchy-feely, talk about values that are not constrained to the corporate structure of values, that would just be frowned upon. You can talk about sports, but you can't talk about, that you're a Kabbalist, for example. So it's just what's in bounds and out of bounds within a company constrains sort of how you operate, how you make decisions.
We see in nature that there is a tremendous amount of influence. Actually, it's a total influence on even the most intimate things that people feel. Actually, what science today and what Kabbalah has told us for thousands of years is that that our desires aren't actually our own desires. That we inherit certain tendencies, and we get our desires and values from a force of interconnection that exists in us, which we feel as like a society.
Well, let me give you a good example of that. I was working in Asia for many years. I came back to the U.S., and I was a vice president at a big consulting firm, A.T. Kearney. Well, I didn't have a house or a car at that time. because I just moved to a new city and I'd been living overseas. So I asked people, where should I live and what kind of car should I get? And so I got the house, got the car, and then a couple years later, I quit my job and started a company to look at sustainability. And then I said, I started to learn that there's this problem with climate change and there's some other things. And so I said, well, what can I do in my personal life? And I learned, well, the car you drive and the house you have matter when it comes to this. And I'd made all the wrong decisions. So I'd been looking at how to choose a car and how to get a house from the point of view of vice presidents in this big company.
Yeah, not only that, the idea that the value that says sustainability is good, when things just become useless and you throw them away, bad.
Yes.
I mean, where did you get that influence?
Right. Well, that's an influence that I got. I walked around Hong Kong and I saw all of these disposable water bottles all over the beach. So I said that must not be good, and I saw a lot of that negative impact on the earth and said we could do better. So a lot of that influence came from personal.
That sounds
firsthand.
like a discernment of yours when you when you're
Yes.
actually between influences, like when you leave your culture and you go to the East.
Yes.
And you start observing things, you don't actually yet have you don't have the force of that culture, whether it's corporate or whether it is social,
Right.
telling you what you're supposed to think. So suddenly you're like an alien. You're like somebody from another planet,
Yes.
observing these desires that I don't understand. Why do they talk this way? Why is their music that way?
Absolutely.
Why do they value these
Yeah.
things? Why do they eat dogs? Why do I eat pigeons? And you see it from some other sort of point of view because you're free momentarily because you leap between systems.
Right.
So in a corporation where people are working, they have a certain goal, and those goals have a hierarchy of values, and the way that I feel about people comes from those things in that workplace. You're saying that you can change those influences and make people work for different reasons? This actually
in different
happen?
ways. Yeah. So one thing, we're working on the culture in my company in a very deliberate manner. So we hire people. Most of them are very nice people, right? They want to get along. They want to be liked. But we have kind of three values that we think are really important and we're trying to embed in the culture. One of them, we say persistence of mission, and everybody's aligned around that. There's another one that we call authenticity. And that means that you actually are talking to each other in a very honest way. So if somebody's doing something that you don't like, you don't just smile and say, okay, and then do something behind their back, but you actually try to work through it in a way that you can work together effectively towards an end.
So then you get an individual, and he's in the culture, this culture that you're describing, and he wants to take a certain action, but he sees as and which is negative or goes against. It's maybe a natural tendency for him to go behind somebody, or as you were describing, but he sees all the other people there putting in an effort to overcome this thing and to make this thing that of transparency and honesty, authentic. You called it
Authenticity, yes.
to be authentic with other people, and you see people putting in that effort, and it gives the person strength to continue doing that.
Exactly. And then we have another one called responsibility, and that means that in any situation, there's something I can do to make a difference. So often it's easy to check out or to have your boss do something or whatever, and if something doesn't go right, then you can blame someone else. But it's always saying, well, what am I contributing? And we feel that to be effective, we need those sorts of things. But authenticity also shows up that people talk about their deep beliefs. We have a lot of people that are quite spiritual in our company from different backgrounds, and some Buddhists and some from Sufi and the like. And they talk about that and might bring some of that to bear in how they interpret what they're up to.
There's an inspirational aspect when a person feels themselves going beyond their own strength by means of connection to others. They also begin to feel an affinity with other people. They feel them differently. They understand the desire because they share that desire too. Now, you're speaking about a kind of change that I don't know how deep that change can go, but the principle itself is actually a principle rooted in laws of nature, and that it is possible actually to make the most what you would think of as unbelievable kinds of changes in people towards things that they wouldn't be able to do in terms of their own nature on their own.
Yes.
But by putting people into a system, especially, and this is how the study of Kabbalah works actually, that if you put a person into a system of, say, study in which there is a goal about being able to use our nature in a very different way, whereas individually a person cannot make this change. It is so fundamentally against our nature.
Right.
But through the connection and influence of what we call friends, it then becomes possible for a person to partake in the strength of that collective desire. And it's the same as if you want to learn to dance, or if you want to be a great race car driver. You have to go there, immerse yourself into that, and draw strength from that kind of thing. And it applies not only to business, but to the fundamental change that will allow us to actually change that impulse in business to a point where it really can succeed. But it has to be based on the correct desire.
Well, it would be interesting to see if some of that correct desire can be created within a context of business, or partially within that context.
It could. I believe it could be if there were enough people who, in the first place, wish to go beyond that fundamental aspect of their nature that makes them, always be inauthentic and go around people and.
Yeah, well, it's my sense that, people are yearning for something that they're not getting during their business day, and they're putting in longer and longer hours. And if they can feel some sense of success and satisfaction from that, there's maybe some hope.
Yeah, I want to thank you for bringing this subject up. It's a great subject, and it's true in business because it's true in nature, and I'm glad that we got a chance to open that up.
Great.
So thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
And we're going to cut away now.